Now I'd like to introduce Donna Laquidara Carr, who will present on contractors' attitudes towards safety and building a safety culture. As the Industry Insights Research Director at Dodge Data and Analytics, Donna provides editorial direction to the Smart Market reports. She has more than 20 years of experience in construction news and analytics. So please welcome to the stage, Donna.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here to share the findings of our Building a Safety Culture Smart Market report. But first I want to explain to you where I'm coming from. So I've worked for Dodge now for over 30 years. And I hope most of you are familiar with Dodge. We are the leading provider of construction information in North America, of data, analytics, and workflow solutions. And you can see the slide lists the different aspects of our business, from the data side with the global network, to suites, which connects manufacturers and designers, to where I sit, which is in market research and intelligence. And specifically, what I work on, let me go back, is the Smart Market Report series. Now, I brought my safety one with me. But these are all available for free download at analyticsstore.construction.com. So they're usually about 40 to 60 page reports. They feature market research with industry players like architects, in this case contractors, and we focus on critical trends that we think are transforming the construction industry. So we've been looking at sustainability since 2006. We do technology and innovation. We have a very big series on BIM, and we've looked a lot at practices and processes, including safety. In fact, this report is a follow-up to a 2012 and really is part of a series on safety. We're actually going to have the next report coming out later this year. So that's very exciting, and keep an eye on analytics.construction.com for that. You can see that we had about 260 survey respondents, kind of evenly split between GCs and trade contractors. We had a good proportion by size. And our goal was really two things in this report. First, we wanted to look at some of the findings we had from 2012 and see how they transformed when we did the study in 2015. In addition to that, though, we also wanted to look at the idea of a safety culture, and that is where I am going to begin. So, what is a safety culture? A safety culture, I don't have the formal definition right in front of me, but a safety culture is when safety is not just something you add on, right? Not just something you think about during a project. It is something that really just informs your thinking throughout the entire organization. And it's top down and it's bottom up. So one of our key partners in this study, CPWR, they have looked at this concept of safety culture, and they've come up with 33 indicators of what might suggest that a company has a strong safety culture that fall into the 7 categories you see here. Now we're going to go into some detail, so I'm not going to go through these categories now because we're going to look at some of the indicators. But we really want to get a sense, though. It's not any one thing, it's how all these things combine together to suggest that safety has imbued the culture of that company. So to get at this, we looked at all 33 indicators, but there were 2 different types of questions we asked, and this first slide represents one type, which is just, are you doing these things or are you not doing these things? Thus the pie charts, right? It's a yes, no. So for something like, safety and health is a key part of strategic planning, you can see that about 2/3 are doing it, right? But you can't measure exactly to what degree. It's just part of the organization. Some of the other things which are not that highly practiced is the company has a joint worker management safety and health committee. You can see less than half the industry reports that right now. And more popular is a formal process for safety-related corrective actions. All right, so that's one type of question we had. And continuing on with this single category of management commitment to health and safety, obviously kind of a top-down approach, how management is really influencing your culture safety-wise. We had 5 more indicators, but in these cases, it's not just a question, are you doing it? It's a question of, to what degree are you doing it? So we still have the pies to indicate the degree to which contractors were reporting, yes, this is something that happens in our organization. But in addition to that, we asked them to measure the degree to which they're doing it. And you can see for each one, we had it at a high, medium, and low level. Now, for a lot of it, I would say for about 2/3 of it, we were asking the number of projects. And did you do this on 70% of your projects? But when it comes to something like clearly defining health and safety expectations, that's not really a project-by-project thing. So when we asked them to rate how frequently they did it, we said, well, what percentage of your health and safety expectations are clearly defined? And you can see for that one, it's moderately high, a little bit over half are saying, yes, we have more than 70% of our health and safety expectations are clearly defined. And you can see for all of these, adoption at some level, just doing it to some degree, is pretty common. The lowest one is 83%. So most of the industry is familiar with these concepts. Most of these industry, at least some of the time, has safety and health as a top agenda item at meetings. It has management participation in all safety and health meetings on the job site. They practice prevention through design, slightly less, but still a significant percentage. And the safety and health data used for improvement. Also, you can see that this is done somewhat frequently across the company. But on most of the ones on this slide, less than 50% are doing these on 70% or more of whatever is being measured. So they're not common practices within these companies. There's knowledge, but there's not common activity around them. And we'll see there's some that are very different from that. So we looked at management, right? How is management influencing safety? Now we're going to look at the recognition of safety and health as a fundamental company value, which again is something that tends to be generated from the top down. So we had 2 yes/no questions on this. It is pretty common to value safety and health at least as much as productivity, but it is far less common to recognize and reward safety and health participation. And we also see, we had a couple of measures on this one that actually measured the degree to which things are done. And encouraging safety and health mentoring is pretty common, but not at a lot, again, common within the overall organizations. They know about it, they're doing it to some degree. But they're still less than half are still doing it on the majority, have the majority of their leadership providing that kind of mentorship. Factoring safety and health into planning and bidding, again, lots of companies familiar with it. Again, very few companies in this case doing it on the majority of projects. Accountability for safety and health on projects. You can see that holding everyone accountable for safety is common industry practice. Not only does almost everyone say that they're doing it, but most of them say they're doing it on the majority of their projects. Near misses being taken seriously and investigated, again, also very common. Almost everyone is doing it to some degree, and the majority are doing it on most of their projects. But using external safety and health audits, much lower. Only 74% are actually have any experience with this at all, and then less than half of those are doing it on the majority. All right, so that's some of the top-down stuff. Now we have that bottom-up thing that's so important. And you're going to find that I'm returning to the idea of job site workers and how they influence safety several times in this presentation because it was one of the key findings of this study. So we see that, again, almost everything here on the left-hand side is a very common practice. It's widely adopted. Workers are encouraged to report unsafe conditions. They're encouraged to report near misses. And they're asked for input on site safety and health conditions. The last one, though, not as frequently. Very frequently across all companies, but not as frequently within the companies. Workers granted stop work authority, pretty common overall. But then we see a big drop-off in terms of the percentage who say that on most of their projects, workers are involved in safety and health planning. There really seems to be, even though there's a lot of activity in general, there seems to be a lot of area for growth in that area. And workers involved in job hazard analysis, also a little less common on all projects. Another bottom-up is really recognizing the importance of supervisors and the leadership that they can provide for safety and health. And supervisors leading by example, another extremely common practice. But subcontractors monitored on their safety practices, reasonably common. 84% do it to a certain degree, and over half are doing it on the majority, have their leadership doing it the majority of the time. However, a real tough one, an indicator of safety culture, right, is just recognizing that it's not just confined to your own people, not just confined to those you're immediately responsible for. And subcontractors mentored on safety practices is far less common overall and not very widely adopted even by those companies that are doing some of it. Effectiveness of company communications is also critical. You can have the best safety messages in the world, but if you're not getting them out to your people, they're not doing anything. But we see that communicating clearly to all employees on safety and health is pretty common. It's slightly less common, though, to communicate consistently. And when we look at things that can be measured by the degree to which they're done, managers regularly engaging with workers one-on-one happens a lot, but it does vary from manager to manager. We don't see it happening with the majority of managers at most companies. And safety and health policies, I'm sorry, it is awfully far away. So having the safety and health policies coordinated with all the subcontractors is, again, an area where there could be some additional growth. This is the final category, looking at the degree to which you get owners involved. And this, as you can see across the board, is one of the lowest categories, with quite a few practices that are adopted by, that aren't adopted by a quarter or more of the industry, and really no one doing this on the majority of their projects. So this getting owners more engaged is another area of key growth that the study pointed to help develop a safety culture. So we have all these measures, but what we really want to look at is, well, what impact do you have if you've really made the investment and really tried to develop a good safety culture? So we used their responses on all of those indicators to come up with a safety culture spectrum. To say, okay, if you said yes, no on any of them, for yes, you get a point. But on anything that could be measured by the amount you're doing it, you had to be doing it 70% of the time or more to get a point. And so you had 33 possible points. And you can see that if you kind of split the respondents out equally to those in the low, moderate, and high category, you land up with the low being those who have 11 indicators or less, high being those who have 20 or more indicators, and you get this even distribution. And if you stick to that distribution and you look at the difference between general contractors and trade contractors, it's actually kind of heartening that there isn't that much of a difference. Yes, there's a few more in that orange high category in the general contractor side. Yes, the light blue low category is slightly higher for the trade contractors, but those distributions are pretty close. But when you look at size of company, a very different picture emerges. And we see that companies with fewer than 100 employees, so we're not talking about the tiny guys, we're not talking about the 10 employee companies. Companies with fewer than 100 employees 40% land up falling in that low safety culture category. And when you look at those with 500 or more employees, 57% land up falling into those high categories. Now, some of this has to do with some of the safety culture indicators, okay? We do recognize that some of them are geared more towards larger companies, that having formalized processes favors you and in this analysis, but it's still too compelling of a difference to be entirely accounted for this, and really calls out to a challenge in the industry, a real place where safety leadership is needed. All right, so now we're going to look at some practices. We did ask about something similar in our 2012 study, but we changed it a little bit so it wasn't quite comparable. So you can see that when it comes to safety policies, there's a pretty big range from things that are done quite frequently to things that are done far less frequently. And you'll have to forgive me, I have to pull my notes on this one. The writing is too small, and I doubt you guys can read it either. So, all right, so developing a site-specific safety plan and health plans, and establishing site-specific training programs for supervisors, workers, and specialty contractors. These are the most common activities. It's much less common to offer safety incentives, because that presents its own challenges, and but we see that safety involving equipment, and let me fill out this slide. Safety involving equipment is pretty common, that we see a very strong positive response to those kind of practices. In the organizational side, we see that 3 practices land up very strong, 2 land up moderate, about 2/3, and 1 lands up this idea of practicing safety through design, still kind of emerging. And we're going to be looking at that at our next study. So, what are the most effective ones? We asked them, okay, this is what you did. Now, what works most effectively for you? The good news is a lot of the things that were on the top of that last slide are here, that they're doing the things that they think are most effective. But I do want to call your attention to that second item, conducting job hazard analysis, job safety analysis before construction begins. That particular practice was only adopted by about 2/3. Again, another call out for an area where the industry could definitely improve. You can see when it comes to the aspects of a world-class safety program, what we asked them is they could pick as many as they wanted from a list of about a dozen, but they had to say, okay, what is really essential to have a world-class safety program? And for the most part, the findings landed up around where they were in 2012. But I do want to call attention to where the red box is. Job site worker involvement moved from being ranked 6th in terms of the number of contractors that selected it to 1st. It was a dramatic difference, and we asked this question again in the current study, and that finding held. So the industry has really had a bit of a transition in terms of its recognition of the essential importance of job site worker involvement. And when it comes to the safety culture spectrum, we can see that those at the high level of the spectrum do recognize the importance of many of these things more than those at the low end of the spectrum. And it was really everything. These are just the top differences. But there was a statistically significant difference down the board for the entire dozen practices. So why is that the case? We speculate that that is because those who have a safety culture recognize that it's not just 2 or 3 things done well, that you have to do a majority of these things to really have a profoundly good safety program. Come on, you can advance. Okay, so business impacts. We also checked in the last 2 studies and in the one that's going to be coming out, what impacts are you seeing on budget and schedule? And we really found that people are dramatically reporting, more likely to report a positive impact from their investment in safeties than negative on project budget, and that they tend to see a decrease in project budget of about 1 to 5%. Same thing with schedule, and we saw an actual uplift on this in 2015, same level of decrease. Project ROI, we see this dramatically improving between 2012 and 2017, those who see a positive impact. Increased by 7%, same level of improvement. And then finally, reducing reportable injuries. You can see that that leapt up 10 percentage points since the study in 2012, and most of them report a pretty high level of reduction. So we can see that safety investments really do pay off on the bottom line. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip this because I really want to get to this slide for sure. To me, this was one of the most important findings. So we have all these business impacts that we measured. Some of them were the ones I just went through. Others are things that are harder to measure on a numerical basis, like staff retention, like the willingness of workers to report unsafe conditions, like the ability to attract new staff. And across the board, on every measure we gained, those who were high on the safety culture spectrum reported a much bigger positive impact from their safety investments across the board on project quality, on project ROI, on things that make a difference to their business than those at the low end. And you can see from this slide that the differences are dramatic, that this investment in improving a safety culture really does pay off. And when it comes to the most influential people or positions for improving safety, again, we see that job site workers are considered critically important, right up there with company leadership. And I think, again, it goes to that top-down, bottom-up, that's very much supported by the findings. I do want to make sure we leave a moment for questions, and I do not want to go into lunch. So one of the things that you might find interesting that I'd like to just sort of end with is, and this finding has stayed consistent, is communicating safety messages to job site workers. What do they find is the best way to do it? And by far, toolbox talks have emerged as the most successful. Training was almost equal to it in 2012. But by 2015, and in the current study, toolbox talks is clearly the best means of getting that message out. So if you're thinking about how to work with your contractors and get your own messages out to their people, that is something you need to bear in mind. So that said, again, I do want to remind you that we have a new study coming out. We're going to be looking at technology and how it impacts safety. And we're going to be looking at that prevention through design, really setting up a nice baseline for what's going on in the industry on that. And for that piece, we also interviewed architects in this particular, in the study that'll be coming out soon. And that should come out sometime in November. So any questions?
Anyone have a question for Donna? Okay.
All
Well,
right.
then, thank you so much, Donna.
All right. Thank you.